28 years later has finally arrived, and while not 28 years in the making, it has been 23 years. Unfortunately, this came a little late due to some unexpected delays, but me and Mr. Minus knew we had to talk about this movie as soon as we could. This film is directed by Danny Boyle, who did the first film, and written by Alex Garland, who also did the first film. Due to the time gap between movies, this had some pretty big shoes to fill. With that in mind, did 28 years later manage to live up to its predecessors? When it comes to my relationship with the previous movies, I had remembered seeing 28 Days Later very briefly when I was younger, but only sat down and watched the whole thing only a few years ago. And then only watched 28 Weeks Later for the first time literally a couple weeks ago. Needless to say, I was heavily anticipating this movie when it was first announced. And I'm sure a lot of us can agree the trailer deserved that award that it won. Now when it comes to 28 years later, yeah, this is an interesting one to say the least. We follow a father and son, Jamie and Spike, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson and Alfie Williams, as Spike is going on his first hunt, which means his first exposure to the world off of their small island community, to which we very quickly realize this world has definitely changed since we were last here. If I'm being honest, once the movie was over, I had to stop my immediate feelings from writing this off as a film I did not like. A big contender as to why my feelings ended up changing was when I realized this was the first in a new trilogy for the franchise. So yeah, with the ending this movie gave, I don't think you can blame me for hating it when I thought there wasn't going to be any more after. However, knowing that the sequel is literally coming out in 6 months definitely helps when it comes to the ending and even the pacing of this film. It is definitely the slowest out of all the 28 films, but each one has their fair share of slow moments. Even then, it's difficult to compare this movie with the previous ones, considering it is very different from the last two. And honestly, given that this takes place 28 years later, it should be expected. Given things introduced in the previous films, there were already things that had to be explained right away, and some do, and some definitely don't. But given the jump in the timeline, this movie brings to the table a lot of new ideas and concepts, especially when it comes to the infected. I really like how this movie went the extra mile in trying to differentiate this from zombies. It's a rage virus, not the living dead. Something holding the movie back in that aspect is that this is hinging a lot on what they end up doing in the next film. If the next movie expands upon the interesting new concepts introduced here, and then they end up executed terribly, that'll probably have an effect on how me and a lot of other people view years. While I personally really enjoyed this film, I'm able to understand why a lot of people came away feeling disappointed. This movie definitely takes creative risks, one that a lot of people are probably going to find silly, especially once we get into the second half of the film. Plot-wise and even technical-wise, as some people are not going to jive with even the editing style these films usually present. Something the movie is able to capture really well, however, is the scope of this new world. There are some incredible drone shots showcasing this land now brought back to the medieval ages. While I wouldn't say the movie is epic, I would say it felt like a literal epic, and I hope the follow-up adds to that feeling. This film is one that you are really going to have to check out for yourself to form your own thoughts, because if it hasn't been clear already, this movie has been very divisive, with some people hating it and some people loving it. And unfortunately, that is to be expected when you decide to take the risks you do in the plot. But for me, I'm glad they were taken. But on that note, let's pass the mic over to Mr. Minus to share his own thoughts on the film.
I fucking hated this film. Just kidding, I did not hate this film. Alright. As someone who was highly anticipating this movie for more than a decade, there was a lot riding on this movie for me. While I wouldn't say it's better than the original, I wouldn't say that the movie failed to meet expectations. It adds more to the universe, but also seems to ignore certain aspects of previous movies, which can anger some. But we'll get to that later. What did I like about the movie? Well, for starters, I can say the movie was well acted on all fronts. We had an amazing cast here from Quicksilver to Voldemort, and everyone definitely brought their A game to the material. Our main character is played by Alfie Williams, and I will say he's one of the best child actors I've seen on a screen. He was able to sell all the emotions you'd encounter in Apocalypse while also managing to still be a kid and not come off like he's trying too hard to be a badass. He struggles, grieves, but he also seems to be coming into his own person by conflicting with those around him and making decisions for himself. He does a great job portraying a child that is seemingly from a different world, but still relatable. Speaking of different worlds, one of the themes of this movie seems to be the idea of the old world versus the new world. Throughout the movie, it almost seems like in the 28 years between this movie and the first installment, society has reverted back to the old days. There's medieval symbolism scattered throughout the movie, sometimes quite literally, that makes it almost seem as if our survivors are now in a parallel situation to the average medieval citizen. There's comparisons between this world and the methods of the new world facing the infection that also showcase the new world just isn't ready for the world that we would face if the apocalypse were to come. That was a tongue twister and a fucking half. Holy shit, I'm surprised I was able to get that whole thing. I was scrambling, holy shit. There's also themes of mortality found in the movie. The concept of death is highly prevalent in the movie, and not in the normal ways you'd expect. Yeah, people are getting their heads ripped off, but there's also a philosophical and emotional approach to the concept that you probably wouldn't expect from a movie that just presents itself as a infection horror thriller through its ads. As good as these themes are, though, I feel they somewhat pale in comparison to the original installment. While some characters do represent aspects of society in this film, I felt the usage of them in the first movie was more effective. The themes in 28 Days Later are interwoven within its characters and have a lot more subtlety. As stated before, 28 Years does showcase its commentary through its characters, but its story beats didn't exactly match the quality. There were a couple times where I felt the symbolism was interrupting the storyline, and thus the movie suffered as a result. Another highly discussed aspect is the camera tricks. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of this by now. In short, the movie does this thing where whenever a zombie gets killed, it sort of does this Max Payne death screen where it quickly flashes through it from different angles. I'm pretty sure this is probably to show off the skill and possibilities of its camera. If you're not aware, the movie was filmed primarily on an iPhone. There were of course fancy lenses used, but it was a really big deal that a movie is taking this risk by using a simple iPhone to film much of its content. As a result, I feel this was a bit of Danny Boyle showing off his skill and the range of the tech he was using. I'm quite 50-50 on this trick. On one hand, it does look cool with certain kills, but there were a few times where it was coming off to me as gimmicky. I wouldn't say it made the movie unwatchable, but it probably wasn't the reaction they were hoping to evoke from me. Now on to the most controversial aspect of the movie, the ending. As stated, there will be no spoilers right now, so fear not, I will tread lightly. All I will say about the ending is I can understand how people would dislike it. It was very out of place and seemingly came out of nowhere. A lot of people probably not like it for that reason, but I can also imagine people finding it funny or at the very least a good laugh if that means anything. As for me, well, much like Mr. Plus, it really is going to depend on how the next movie goes. There is definitely room to improve on this ending, both currently but also retroactively. If the next movie builds upon it, it will likely be better received on all ends, but if it's abandoned, oh dear. It's a bit of a cop-out, but I'm going to wait this one out and see how it goes. I can only hope it's built upon, but if it's ignored like 28 Weeks Later was, this is going to age pretty badly. Really, the biggest saving factor for this movie is the fact that I know there is more coming. If this was meant to be the end of the franchise as we know it, I would probably be a lot harsher on it, but considering this was just one part of a larger story, I can't entirely write it off. Is it the best of the franchise? Not by a long shot. Is it a disaster and an absolute failure of a movie? I'd say that would be too harsh. For that reason, I give this movie a very middling 7 out of 10. It's got good technical aspects, interesting story beats, and builds upon its universe in ways that I can at least say are interesting. That said, it definitely does feel a bit unexplained in certain aspects, and is currently reliant on movies that haven't come out yet. It also should be noted that the score is highly subject to change, as if the sequel is a letdown, this score could also drastically go down.
Overall, I thought this was a welcome addition to the 28 franchise. It introduces tons of new ideas, consistently kept me on my toes with where the plot was going, and leaves me very interested to see where the story is going to get taken from here. If I were to rate 28 Years Later, I would say it gets a solid 8 out of 10, and just for comparison, I'd give Days a 9 and Weeks a 7. But with all the spoiler-free talk out of the way, let's get into the true meat of this film and talk spoilers.
Yes, spoilers, so go away if you have not seen the movie, or if you just don't care, you can stay. But I feel like probably the first thing we could probably talk about is just the opening of this movie. The 28 days, weeks, years, the 28 franchise at this point really is pretty well known for having intense openings.
This one was definitely shorter out of the openings, shortest.
Yeah, I will say it also holds the most terrifying part of the movie, which is the fucking Teletubbies, to say the least. That fucking sun. I remember, like, the sun showed up, and you could see one of the kids was looking, like, super stressed out, which I'm pretty sure was supposed to be, like, the kid knows something is wrong, but part of me just can't help but think, yeah, it's because the fucking writers know that damn sun is, like, the worst thing on Earth, and that's why the kid was getting scared.
It was very different out of the openings. It started out like the first part of the opening was really dark because a bunch of children are getting murdered. And it was like more of a family that was getting killed in front of, and it's from a child's point of view. Like you're following like a young kid through this, and it was over the top at first, which was scary. But then when he went to his like dad, which I've been seeing confusion on whether he is actually his dad or if they just called him father, because he's a priest, but I think he was his dad. When the dad starts going crazy, that was almost too over the top to where it wasn't scary anymore. Whereas the beginning of the opening was over the top and intense, and that kind of lost its intensity. in terms of the opening, and then we just
Yeah, I can see that.
went into the rest. But so it was the least good out of the openings, but I still thought it was like very good, just not as good as the others.
Yeah, I mean, part of me was like on the subject of like the father/priest dude, just kind of chanting as he gets consumed by zombies and shit like that, or the infected. Sorry guys, I'm just gonna call them zombies. That's just what they are to me. But on that note, like, I remember seeing that in the trailer, and I thought like that scene in particular was going to be crazy, mostly because the idea of it was pretty wild. Just a priest just being like, oh yes, this is a good thing, and like he just lets the zombies like eat him up. Probably because I was thinking this was where like the commentary of the franchise was going to be kicking in, like the idea that religion in an apocalyptic setting would probably be dangerous, or at least more so dangerous than you could argue it is now, because when you reach that critical point of society, religion could potentially be used as a weapon at that point.
There's also theories that I don't know if it's a theory, it's pretty much confirmed, I think, that it was a cult before. Like, they were already a cult, and the cult got attacked by the infection, and now
it's even worse.
Now it's a worse cult. But I'm pretty sure that it was said or shown that they were a cult before the infection. I mean, they're all a bunch of they all look the same, unless it's just one big blonde family. But they all stay blonde, so it could be that the kid created the cult later. But the way that father acted at the end, I think it was a cult from the start.
Yeah, it was very cult-like. That, or you could just argue it's just like extreme, like religious dedication. Because I mean, the sad thing is there are people like that. We're just like, just the basic religions we have in the actual world, where they would probably pull something like that, where they would probably just scream to God himself how happy they are that, the world's getting destroyed or some shit. Like
the guy outside holding the sign is real happy right now.
Yeah, pretty much. But I mean, so yeah, it was interesting, however, to see that. Again, I thought it was going to tie more into like the themes of the story and stuff like that. But I guess, like, speaking of themes, though, when it comes down to 28 years later, so I guess for me, like, I mentioned it earlier, but one of the themes I was noticing throughout the movie was the fact that it seemed like this was sort of showcasing the old world versus the new world, and how the new world probably isn't prepared for a situation like this.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like, you had that one soldier dude who shows up in the movie, if you haven't seen it. There's... Like, I think he was, like, a Swedish, like, naval officer. His, like, ship, like, crashed off in England, or just Britain, I guess, and thus he just got marooned on the beach, and his whole squad pretty much just gets taken out. The fact that they had assault rifles didn't really matter. Like, the zombies just took them out immediately.
And that's where we get our Mortal Kombat scene, isn't it? Where the guy's head gets ripped off with his spine intact and beat with it.
Up, yeah. Just pulled like the Predator on him. But yeah, no, so it was, a part of me was noticing, like, these guys have assault rifles and they seem like they should be prepared to fight like an entire apocalyptic setting, but they can't. Meanwhile,
they're essentially kind of our soldiers from Weeks that we see able to mow them down, even though Weeks doesn't really matter. Like, in these movies, when we see the soldiers, they're able to take them down. In this, it's they're not doing much at all.
Yeah, those assault rifles like meant like jack fucking shit. And like, I think it even kind of came down to like the soldier's personality, because he was kind of like the soldiers in the first 28 Days Later movie, where he was like arrogant and very like impatient and cocky, if that makes sense. And I think that was kind of his downfall, is what that was. So I think that was the commentary, that this new world is not ready for a survival situation because it's too, like, image focused. It's too focused on itself. Whereas Spike, who represents, like, the medieval day type aspect of this world, they're pretty much more ready to fight for it because they struggle every day. So they know what it's like to fight. Which, that was another thing, too. I noticed, like, Spike, if you see the movie, or if you have seen the movie, like, a thing I noticed was when you had the school showing like all the jobs the kids can have, it was basically just medieval jobs, like farmer and like seamstress or whatever, and like the watchtower especially. It was like, yeah, these are jobs that like you probably only could get when you were in the medieval days, unless you were born to like the knighthood or like the priesthood or something like that. But point is, like, these guys are pretty much taken back to the medieval days. They had no technology. They lived in this small village looking setting, and your jobs are pretty much nothing. Like, guys like us would be screwed because we can't be YouTubers. So we're just stuck like having to farm or
Work.
just carry heavy weights and stuff.
With the whole new world and old world, Spike is sort of the character that is drawn to the new world, and Jamie, Aaron Taylor Johnson, who isn't in the movie that much, is drawn to the old and isn't willing, or seems very unwilling, to go forward. So it's hard in the terms of this movie because going forward means leaving the safe island and going out into the infected world.
Mm-hmm.
So you really understand like that viewpoint of not wanting to, of being like, no, I think we're fine here where we're at. And so when the film shifts and Spike decides to go out on his own, I'm sure that really is why a lot of people, me included, are like, this is so dumb. What are you doing? But you get it at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I do think, because like you said, Spike is sort of drawn to the new world. He was drawn to the idea of a doctor from like the more modern ages, was, out there. Granted, he was doing it just because he wanted to help his mother, whom he thought his father was just not going to help ever at this point.
And then after that scene with his father, where his father like slaps him, punches him, hits him, and Spike pulls the knife on him, that was... 28 Days did it a lot more, where it was showing how humans and the infected are not that different in terms of its rage. I feel like that was like the one scene in years to show that, because obviously Aaron Taylor Johnson still has a lot of that rage. He takes it out on his house and his kid.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was that moment where, for Spike, the ways of old were over for him, because it just didn't match with what he was trying to do.
Exactly, yeah. And I guess, like, on that note, though, when we're talking about, like, how the humans were not too different from the infected, they're a lot closer than we thought, considering, if you're unaware, there is a pregnant zombie in this movie.
Yeah. A lot of differences have been made to the changes, to the infected.
Yeah. So, I mean... Okay, so the pregnant zombie, which I think that does still tie into the themes, I will say, of the movie, because I guess, like, just as a breakdown for that scene, for those who haven't seen it and you're just curious, basically Spike's mom, who's kind of delirious, like she's suffering from like a bit of dementia, she sees a female zombie who is pregnant, and I was wondering, hold up, so did the zombies procreate or did someone fuck a zombie? But I guess that's really here nor there. But the thing was that she sees the pregnant zombie, and she's instead, like, not afraid of it. She's drawn to it. The zombie then gives birth. We get to watch a zombie give birth. And the soldier, who's, again, from the New World, is saying, we have to kill the kid. He's, like, about to just straight up shoot, like, this newborn with his rifle. But he doesn't also want to kill them because they're willing to die for this baby. And he's willing to kill the baby, but he doesn't want to kill them. Eventually, the Alpha, which we'll discuss more in a sec, I imagine, takes out the soldier. But
what was crazy about that pregnancy scene is that it was that moment the infected stopped, like, attacking. It was giving birth, and so it kind of like had no care or thought about like attacking the mom or Spike. To the fact the mom and the infected, this is probably why the scene is so strange, is when they hold hands and like the mom assists in this infected giving birth, and a lot of like, why is it the infected like killing her? Why is it holding her hand like that? And so that just, it opens the door to so many possibilities with the infected. I mean, I took it as like the pregnancy's probably just rage-wise taking over and making it to where it doesn't care. Because once the baby's out, it just snaps back into wanting to slaughter. And then they just put down the mom. And then Alpha shows up, not very happy.
Yeah, so the thing about the Alpha, like...
which we're introduced to earlier. Yeah, Alpha's introduced to, like, near the beginning.
Yeah, the Alpha shows up earlier. You see, like, a bunch of the infected are hanging out in front of, like, the Shine Down tree. I call it the Shine Down tree because it's literally, like, the tree on their very first album. They're just hanging out in front of that thing. And
a lot's hanging out. by that tree.
Yeah, lots hanging out by that tree. And then the zombie, like, screams, and then they all, like, it's kind of like Left 4 Dead in a way. I keep referencing Left 4 Dead, I'm sorry, but,
I
like,
was going to say, this
it's
movie
kind of
made
like,
me think of Left 4 Dead a lot when they were introducing these new infected types. I was
yeah,
like,
the
oh
special
yeah,
infected, yeah.
we're in like a Left 4 Dead type of situation here.
And so, like, all the zombies just sort of, like, follow the whim of the alpha, and they, like, run after them and attack them and stuff like that. But so the alpha shows up, and he's not happy. He's quite the. You can tell why they call him the alpha, particularly with what's in between his legs. That was like a big point. And the worst part is, I'm gonna say this: if people find the engineers from the Alien movies hot, that means there's probably someone in that theater right now who's having the exact same fantasy with the alpha, which is interesting. This is what I mean by I was wondering if someone fucked the zombie and that's why she got pregnant, because I was like, people would fuck a zombie. There's people out there that are big enough gooners to do it.
Oh god.
So, like, they do it. They fucking do it. So, but I mean, yeah, so, but that's another thing too, and maybe I'm just weird for thinking about this, but it's like, okay, he is the alpha. He's got a big dick. Is that supposed to imply he is the one that impregnated that zombie? Because
I don't think it's
when
because
he
his dick
walks
was so
by-
big, but I do think they imply that he is like the father
Yeah.
of the baby, because he's mad.
Yeah, because he walks by and he like sees the body and he like laments almost, it seems.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then
It like
goes
pisses
into
him off
berserk
that
mode.
that happened.
Mhm.
Which there was like they showed a lot of like a community kind of behavior with the infected, like the alpha being the alpha and all the other infected following. There's scenes of them like washing off in like the river, and a lot, even like the pregnancy, is just shows more of that, how there isn't that much difference between, I guess, humans and infected, but more from the infected side, to where we're seeing how the infected are kind of oddly living by themselves and are just able to without eating people. And because that was the big question, people were like, was they are supposed to decompose after like what 5 weeks it was, where they just kind of weren't
Something
a
like that,
problem
yeah.
anymore. But you immediately learn that some of these infected just eat the wildlife. Like they're eating deers, and some are eating like just bugs off the ground. So it was like that, I guess, nature finding its way. Like it will live if it
Life
has to.
finds a way.
Yeah, and the infected certainly did. Which would be that old world if going into our next big character that shows up in the film. Because Spike and his mom go out because he wants to find out what's wrong, find the doctor. They encounter the pregnant zombie. It gives birth to a seemingly regular baby. And our soldier gets killed, so it's just Spike and the mother and the baby. And they end up finding Voldemort, the doctor.
Yes, Voldemort. And he's an interesting character, I will say.
Very.
It almost seems like it's because he's this merger between the old and new world, because he was a doctor like during the normal days when like there was no infection, but he seems like he's acclimated decently well to like this almost medieval setting that they have now, in this new world. I liked him as a character. I mean, obviously it's fucking Voldemort, so he's just gonna be good at acting like no matter what he does. But the other thing too is that he also still kind of builds on the idea of like what the changes of the infected have been, because he even acknowledges like he has a name for the alpha. He's been able to study his behavior and all this other stuff. So
yeah,
clearly,
he hits it with morphine and just calms the alpha down, and then doesn't kill him like you would think anyone else would do. When
he just leaves him
stop. He was like you were saying, he's that merger. He's like, even because when the people when Aaron Taylor Johnson and that whole community talks about that doctor, it's like he hates him, and because he saw this, he remembers seeing him back in the day with like this whole grid system of dead bodies that he was just burning, and that I feel was supposed to it was supposed to be more fear. Like Aaron Taylor Johnson was afraid of that doctor, crazy guy. And as a whole, the doctor's representation of like that new way of living, kind of with the infected alongside in a way, learning to live with, is also something that would terrify Aaron Taylor Johnson as well. So he's both afraid of the doctor and in that sense afraid of the idea as a whole of
the
going
idea
forward.
that we can coexist with the infected, which is admittedly still kind of an understandable idea, because I don't know if I would want to coexist with
It is
an
very
alpha
strange.
lurking about. Yeah, but I guess if you can theoretically reason with the alpha, or at least keep him at bay, then there's probably no problems with it.
Yeah.
But the other thing that he brings that's important is the fact that he is able to diagnose that the mother is suffering from cancer to the best of his ability, at least, because
Pretty sure he finds out she has a brain tumor.
Yeah, he mentions like how he doesn't have the technology to be entirely sure of it, but considering her symptoms and her behavior and what he's been able to observe, like he's like, you have cancer.
And she's in like the late stages of cancer, to where she's got like the way she's been acting throughout the movie too, like she's in constant agony, it seems. So it seems like she's got a couple weeks left, it seems.
Yeah, she's like in agony. She's slipping in and out of like sanity, it seems. So it's like it's pretty much taken over. The things become like terminal, I think is the term, or something like that.
Yeah, she's got terminal brain cancer.
Yeah, terminal brain cancer.
Which also explains why she was so calm during that pregnancy with the zombie.
Yeah,
or the
But so it pretty much just then means like at that point there's nothing to do for her and she will die, which the kid, obviously he's a kid, so he wants to believe and fight that there could be a way to save her and stuff, but they both know, especially the doctor knows, like it's over, dude, like game over, man, we can't save her.
Yeah. And he kind of gives off says the idea that, like, I think he says something along the lines of like some deaths are better, something love related, to where it was essentially like we could kill her now, like humanely, or she could die horrifically because of the tumor in a couple weeks.
Yeah, because the cancer is just going to keep eating her until like it just gives her a horrible, painful death.
Like the infected do.
Which, like, speaking of, I guess, like, how, like, the idea of killing her now, so, and this is probably going to be important in, like, the next movie, considering it's, like, the title they have for it, but Voldemort has, like, this tower, or I guess, like, this area, temple of just, like, human skulls and bones and stuff like that, which normally anyone would probably be terrified of this.
Makes sense. You understand why people are afraid of him at first glance.
Yeah, but it seems like he's doing it more for sentimental purposes. Like, he's not doing it because he's a psychopath and he's like, yes, this is my bone temple and all the people I've killed are here. No, he's more so like, I'm trying to build something with everything we've lost, which is probably what he was doing when Aaron Taylor Johnson saw him, like, burning the bodies. Like, he was probably trying to, like, begin his project of, like, creating a monument to those who were lost in some way, which I guess you could argue does kind of build upon the idea of, like, this is a medieval world, like he's building like this monument / temple to the fallen, so there was like an almost like spiritualistic like thing behind it that you could find a lot in the medieval days. But you also could just argue maybe he was just doing it because it was the best way he could honor those who have fallen, because as of right now, like, their bodies are just going to be sitting there rotted, and like there's really nothing that you can do for them at that point, you know?
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what he decided he was going to do, or I guess they decided that they were going to do with the mother. They were just going to kill her and then just add her to the temple so that way she can be, I guess, like, honored in her death, which Spike brings the skull all the way up to the top, so she gets to sit atop the entire temple. Which, side note, by the way, so I heard a lot about how the ending to this movie was supposed to be, like, very funny to some people. When he was climbing up there and he put the skull at the top, I was sitting here thinking, you know, they said the ending was pretty funny, and this looks like it's kind of wrapping up. Is this whole temple just gonna, like, crash and fall underneath him, and, like, that's the end of the movie?
God.
But thankfully that didn't happen. I'm not gonna lie, if that did happen, I probably would have been like, yeah, no, this is bad.
Me and Caleb thought it was gonna end as he put the skull on the top.
Yeah, that's what I was also thinking,
which
too. The only thing
we
that was
argue
holding
is
me back
probably
was some of the comments I saw in our 28 days video. Yes, I'm watching you guys. Was, like, saying, like, oh, yes, the ending is funny, or some people were saying the ending's stupid and goofy, so I was like, okay, this isn't a goofy ending unless, so, yeah. But yeah, speaking of the ending, though.
Oh, yeah. The ending of this movie.
So, yeah, so
that
if you couldn't tell,
should have been,
on...
the ending probably should have been when he put the skull on top.
Yeah,
but,
so, okay,
they had to keep going.
If you couldn't tell... Yeah, if you couldn't tell based off of what I was, I guess, reporting on the comments of our last video, it's a very divisive ending, to say the least. which we kind of said it back in the video itself, but I guess we'll just kind of give more details now. So, the movie ends, Spike, like, gives the baby to the community and kind of just goes about his, life at that point in the wilderness.
Yeah, leaves off on his own.
Yeah, and then he runs into the dude from Sinners, I believe, and then he's, like, dressed all fucking weird. Like, he definitely doesn't look like a zombie apocalypse survivor. And then his crew of, like, sports Power Rangers dudes show up, and they all just kind of, like, have a throwdown with all the zombies in the area.
Like a Power Rangers throwdown.
Yeah, it's Power Rangers type shit. They're, like, doing parkour, and they're, like, throwing things around, and, like, it's pretty wild and very over the top.
There's also
definitely
the Teletubbies theme song is being a rock heavy version is being played in the background.
Yep. Which, like, is interesting. So, I mean, like I said in the review earlier, this is definitely going to be a 50-50. And it was definitely out of place. I'm not going to deny that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But I guess, like, there's some questions I have with that. Because, I mean, from what I'm gathering, that's supposed to be the kid from the start. He's all grown up now.
Yeah, he's Jimmy.
Yeah, he's Jimmy.
Which throughout the movie you see, like, very little of Jimmy's, like, marks on the new world. Like, there's the infected hanging upside down with Jimmy's name carved. I think Jimmy's put on a building somewhere, like, spray painted. So there's vibes you get from this group, this cult. Wild ones.
We as the audience know it's Jimmy, or at least we can assume it is.
So we could assume the next film is going to follow Jimmy and his cult, and probably Spike as well. I know the director said something about how they'll each stand alone on their own 2 feet. I don't know if that means they're going to be, like, really separate from each other, but
yeah,
I hope it, like, at least follows Jimmy and explains a lot of that up. Or at least explains a lot of what we had seen in this one, even if it doesn't, like, pick up right after.
Yeah, because, like I said, it definitely wasn't, if this was the end of the series, I probably would have been quite upset, but
yeah,
knowing that there's more, and we're probably going to find out more about Jimmy, and we're probably going to see Spike interact with this crew more, tells me this can be saved, and it's probably not as bad as we're thinking it might be right now.
It's very jarring.
Very.
It's whiplash.
I guess that's the thing, though, about this movie, too. So I do have a lot of questions, though, regarding this, because it's like, okay, Jimmy's the leader, but, like, it looked like all the kids at the start got eaten. So did he just, like, recruit new people into his crew, or into his cult, sorry? Or did, like, did some of them survive? And, like, that's, like, where the Teletubbies shit comes in, because, like, the Teletubbies theme playing kind of tells me there's, like, a radical group of Teletubby cults, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I
So,
mean,
like,
the image in his brain is the Teletubbies on the screen and a bunch of kids getting murdered by it, so...
Yeah, so that's why I'm thinking, like, is this the same crew of kids? Like, did only some of them die and the rest survived and Jimmy and them, like, came up? Or did Jimmy just become a Teletubby stan and was like, yes, this is the new way? Like, he built a cult around the Teletubbies or some shit.
I have no idea. I don't know if it's, like, the same people, because that's why there's the potential of it being a cult since the beginning, that the cult just went through the infection. There's some theories I've seen where they might be immune in some way. Like, this cult might have, like, a special immunity, like they introduced in Weeks in a way. That I feel would be a little too silly if they were, like, the special infected type. Is this Jimmy cult? Depending on how they do it, that could really go either way. But,
yeah. I mean, it looks like the infected, like the people who were getting infected at the start were turning themselves. So probably not like a special like a special group of survivors, like probably not like asymptomatic carriers. I imagine is probably not what they are.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing, I guess, about this movie is that there's a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. Like, this is just one of them. Like, another question I had was, how did the zombie give birth to a child that wasn't, like, infected? I know, like, the movie, quote, explained it when Voldemort just said, like, the magic of the placenta. But, like, and I understand maybe we're just not in that type of movie. But a part of me was just thinking, like, that's kind of a lazy way to explain it. Like, it borderline is just saying magic, I guess. But it's like,
it was an odd, like, it's an infected newborn, but I guess they just don't know what to expect from it. Because, like, could be, like, how Weeks was with the asymptomatic because I mean it's not like a cured baby. They I think they said it's like this child is infected, but it's fine, which I'm surprised in the know, because he said like, hey, this child's infected. I would be a little worried about these people just stomping it to death.
I would not be saying that at all. Yeah.
But I mean, surprisingly, they took it in, and I mean, I guess they thought hard. It was like, okay, it's literally a newborn infant. It's not gonna do much. But what if that little fucker bites somebody?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any of these. Well, Dawn of the Dead remake hadn't come out around that time, but like, that'd be one of those things where I'd be like, I'm just saying, like, zombie movies show pregnancy and zombies don't really mix well. I'm just saying, like, so there's that. That was actually kind of what went through my head when the baby was first born. Was literally like the fucking Dawn of the Dead baby that was born, and just immediately went fucking nuts, and they had to kill it in seconds. But I mean, at the end of the day, it is a different zombie movie made by different filmmakers, so obviously the rules are kind of just up to them to do. I guess part of me just wishes the rules of this new world were just a little bit more clear. And again, I understand you probably don't want to be like having Marvel-esque dialogue where it's just an exposition dump, but it's still, like I said, it is a bit odd because we're kind of just like told, oh, it just works this way, and like there's no explanation behind it at all.
Yeah.
But there's that. But I mean, like, overall, I'd say really when it comes down to this movie, I wasn't disappointed with it, even though I will say it's probably the lowest rated of the three. I'd be more so disappointed if it was like, this gets a 3 out of 10 or some shit, because then it's like they fucked up. You know what I mean?
Would you say that this is like 28 days and 28 weeks are better than 28 years later?
For now, I'd say Weeks ever so slightly beats it out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not by a lot. If you remember in the video that we did, I gave Weeks a high 7 out of 10. This one's like a middling 7. So, and again, it's very possible that if the next movie comes out, builds upon the Jimmy cult, or just builds upon Spike's story, or like retroactively improves some aspects of like certain characters' story, or just the themes, then I can view this being better. Because it's kind of like, I liken it to how, say, if I were to just watch Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring all by itself, like, I'd feel pretty unsatisfied if I just did not watch Two Towers and Return of the King. Because then it's just like, there's no official, like, there's no closure to the story. Everything seems unfinished. Like, there's nothing I can do at that point. But knowing that that movie is not the end and there's still more to do, it's set up a lot of stuff and it's all going to get paid off. That
Hopefully
makes the movie better. Yeah. So, well, at least for Lord of the Rings, it's how it went. So I'm kind of hoping it's going to be the same deal here, where it's like, once this trilogy is done, hopefully I can look back at 28 years with a higher rating, because right now it just barely loses out to Weeks. I can see it beating Weeks, but we'll just kind of have to wait and see how that goes, which it does kind of suck it goes that way. I feel like I'm just kind of making excuses for a movie, but that's just how I feel. I don't want to write the movie off just yet. I will have no problem giving this movie a 5 out of 10 if like literally nothing gets built on and it just ends as like an island of a movie. You know what I mean? Like,
I was a little higher in the rating, not by much. I mean, I gave it an 8, but
yeah,
I feel like 28 Days had that experimental aspect to it that Weeks seemed to lack, and Years seemed to like bring back like by a lot. And so,
yeah, that's fair.
I find it like literally the exact opposite, slightly better than Weeks.
Yeah, and that's a fair assessment. There was a part of me wondering, is this better than Weeks? But I couldn't give it to Years just off the fact that Weeks started and ended.
Yeah.
Whereas it feels like Years is still going. You know what I mean?
It's a story that is supposed to be taken in multiple movies.
Yep. I think the next one isn't directed by Danny Boyle, though, which is a little concerning.
Which is odd. Yeah. But I mean, you at least, unlike Weeks, I'm sure they have they're overseeing it.
I hope so. Yeah. I'm not sure if Alex Garland is still writing it, but I know, like, they said, yeah, Danny Boyle's not directing it, which does make me wonder if it is supposed to be a prequel then. Like, maybe Danny Boyle was like, I want to write the next chapter. You just, like, you can make the prequel about Jimmy's cult, and I'll just do whatever I want after that.
Well, they filmed them back to back, actually, so that makes sense why they would be different directors. Because I think they're being filmed at the same time. So
yeah,
Danny was probably doing Years, and the other person was doing the next one at the same time.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, overall, I'd say I'm happy I got to see it. As I said, it's been more than a decade of anticipation,
Yeah.
and the results could have been a lot worse. So there's that.
Mhm.
Hopefully, by the time this trilogy wraps up, it will be like the return of the franchise that we've been waiting for all this time.
Yeah.
I guess the one other thing I'll say is that there was a funny scene that I wanted to talk about.
Mm.
I just thought the scene where the soldier shows Spike, the girl that he thinks is hot, like he's got back at home and she's like all plastic surgeryed up and like she looks very like all makeup and everything. And then Spike was like, is she okay? She might be having an allergic reaction in that photo. And I was like, I thought that was so funny because I guess it kind of does, it builds upon the themes, you could argue, too, of the movie. But I just kind of thought it was like, oh, yeah, realistically, a kid who has never seen plastic surgery would probably think a plastic surgeoned up person would look very scary or like concerned. You know what I mean?
Yeah, depending on how far it goes. Like,
yeah,
that
so I
photo
thought
was,
that
like,
was at least pretty
extreme.
funny. That was so funny though, but yeah, no, that was the only other thing I wanted to get on because I felt like that was actually a funny like scene. So there was that. But yeah, no, I got nothing else to say. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you guys aren't too upset with our opinions. I know some people in the comments had very strong opinions on years, but these are just our thoughts. We're just two random guys on YouTube, so clearly we mean the whole world if that is the case. But
Definitely leave down your own thoughts more because I'm very curious, since this is so divisive, what everyone thinks of it.
Would love to see how our viewers all come together on this one because I've seen, like I said, some comments saying they loved it, others thought it was garbage. So, but yeah, I guess in that case, hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys in the next video, and stay beautiful, everyone.
Yeah. See you in the next one.
Bye.